How's it going, folks? I'm Des with DesFit, and this is the brand new Elite Rizer. So what exactly is this thing? Well, the Elite Rizer adds some extra spice to your indoor cycling training by simulating some of the hills that you would experience in some indoor cycling training platforms like Zwift. So when you start to go up a steep hill, it's not only the resistance that changes on your smart trainer, but so does the actual position of your bike, which simulates what it would be like in real life. And this is both for uphills and downhills, where it can simulate up to a 20% uphill and all the way down to a negative 10% downhill. But that's not the only trick that the Rizer has up its sleeve. The Rizer also integrates the steering functionality that was originally found in Elite Sterzo, where you're able to steer within certain areas and events in some cycling apps. So the Rizer isn't just about being a gradient simulator. It actually adds a lot of interactivity to your indoor cycling experience. So first things first, you will have to have a compatible smart bike trainer to use the Rizer, and here's the current list of compatible Elite trainers. And the main thing here is that these trainers allow the bike to rotate on the rear axle. If you try to use the Rizer with a trainer that doesn't allow for this movement, you can actually damage your frame. But the other thing with these trainers is that they actually transmit a special ANT+ signal that the Rizer uses to simulate the gradient. So the Rizer doesn't connect to the indoor cycling training platform that you're using like Zwift, rather it connects directly to the trainer itself. Now at this point, you may be wondering if the Rizer works with non-Elite branded trainers, and that's a yes, but the compatibility may not be quite perfect. So first and foremost, the trainer has to have the rear axle that rotates. That is by far the number one thing you have to make sure of. But with the other non-Elite branded trainers, what the Rizer will do is monitor the speed and power coming off of the ANT+ FE signal to calculate the slope. Now, at this point, they aren't officially supporting any third-party trainers, but my guess is that this will change in the future. So stay tuned for further updates on that, and I'll probably post an update on Twitter or something like that when that comes around. Okay, so now that we've gone over what you need to use the Rizer, let's go ahead and get this thing out of the box and set up so we can see how it actually works. So first thing, this thing is not small, as you can tell from the size of this box, which you could easily have a keg of beer inside. In the top of the box, there's a small box that has the international adapters, the manuals, and the axle adapters. And then there's another box inside that has the quite large power brick, and there's pretty much no way you'll mix this adapter up with anything else that may be lying around. And then finally, there's the Rizer itself in all its glory. So for what you get inside the box, there's the Rizer itself, that enormous power brick, international power cables, manuals, as well as axle adapters. So you can use a normal quick release front axle, and it's nice to see that it does come with a quick release, but there's also adapters for 12x100, 15x100, as well as 15x110 front axles, and they're labeled quite nicely. Now, this thing is not light by any means, and really it should be built with some heft to it since it needs to be stable. And what's nice is that Elite provides a nice handle on the front side of the unit to carry it around or position it. All 4 feet are adjustable to accommodate for floors that may be a little bit off, and each of the feet have a rubber ring on the bottom to keep it from shifting around. And before we get to actually installing the bike, I want to show you the bottom of the unit as well, and you'll notice that it's built on these 2 bars that allows the unit to move forward and backward while still having a nice stable platform. And then another thing I'll quickly point out is that the fork support not only swivels from side to side, but it also rotates, which allows for the steering functionality that I was talking about earlier. And there's even one more trick with this fork support that I'll show you once the bike is mounted. To set it up, it's pretty simple, where you first want to choose the appropriate adapters for your bike, and I like the fact that these adapters have a little rubber O-ring inside, which keeps these adapters in place, so if you move the Rizer around, the likelihood of these adapters falling out is pretty slim. And at this point, all you do is just plug it in, and it does an automatic centering and calibration procedure. Next, you probably already have your bike in place on your trainer, and all you do is just remove your front wheel and then slide the Rizer into place and secure it in with whatever type of front axle release that you have. To pair it with your trainer, you simply just long press the lock icon on the top of the Rizer for about 3 seconds, and then the LED starts flashing until it finds the compatible trainer. And this is indicated by the right LED on the bottom of the Rizer, which will then turn to a solid green. And if there's no light, or if the light is blinking green, the Rizer was still waiting to pair to a trainer. And that's basically it for pairing. So for simulation mode, you want to make sure that the LED on top of the Rizer is on, and at that point it uses the gradient data being sent from the trainer, which is being controlled by whatever app that you're using like Zwift, and it automatically changes the grade based on whatever's in the app. And then for how the Rizer reacts to gradient changes in Zwift, on slower transitions it transitions smoothly, and on quicker changes it does a pretty good job as well. Like on this section coming up to the volcano climb, there are some rollers, and you can see that the grade displayed in Zwift matches the grade on the Rizer that you can see in the Rizer smartphone app. There are only a handful of places in Zwift where there are some extremely quick transitions with the rolling hills where it couldn't quite keep up, but I think there was only once or twice that I even noticed that. Overall, it does a really good job at replicating what you see on the screen for the hills, as well as matching the gradient that's displayed in the app. But let's say you don't want to have it automatically simulate the gradient in Zwift, or let's say you're not even using a cycling training platform that supports that gradient simulation. So that's where you can manually adjust the grade using the controls on the top of the unit. So when you're in simulation mode, the top LED is lit up, and to take it out of simulation mode, you just simply press the lock icon and the LED turns off. And then using the up and down controls is as simple as just pressing the button, of course, where each button press moves the riser by 1%. But one interesting thing I found is that the movement only happens after you release the button. So if you just single press and let go, it moves. But if you try to hold down the button, nothing will happen until you release it. So I would like to have it so I could hold down the button to make bigger changes in gradient, but that's just how it is, at least at this point, where I have to repeatedly press the button to make larger changes. Kind of minor, but just something I wanted to mention. Now, the controls on top of the riser are somewhat accessible being right at the top of the unit, but you still have to sort of reach in front of your bars to access them. But what's great is that there's also a dedicated smartphone app which connects to the riser where you can perform all the same functions and allows you to customize some more settings. So you can switch between simulation mode and manual mode. You can increase or decrease the grade by 1% just like on the top of the riser itself. It also displays the current slope, but then there's some additional settings where you can access like the difficulty setting, which can change how the riser will react with grade changes. So if you prefer to have a lot less physical change in grade from what is being displayed on the app, you can do that. And you can also go the other way around where there's more grade than what the app is sending over. You can also reset the flat or zero level of the riser if for some reason that's off, and you can also set up different profiles. So you can set the minimum and maximum grade for a particular rider here. So let's say that there's somebody that doesn't necessarily want the riser to go all the way up to 20%, which by the way is very high. And you can also set it so it doesn't go all the way down to negative 10%. So you can set the maximum and minimum based on the rider comfort. And then for the rest of the profile settings, those are generally used when the riser isn't paired to an elite trainer that's sending over the gradient data. So when the riser is paired with a trainer that's just sending over the speed and power data, the riser can utilize the profile data to more accurately replicate the grade based on the user's bike wheelbase, weight, and rider weight. And with the profiles, you can also switch between them on the riser itself by pressing both the up and down arrow keys at the same time, and the profile number is indicated by the number of times the LED on the top blinks. So if it's profile number 3, it blinks 3 times. If it's profile number 2, it'll blink 2 times. And there's also this safety mode toggle right here. So safety mode will set the grade back to 0 or flat if you stop pedaling for about 5 seconds. So if you don't prefer this, you can disable safety mode, which will just keep it in place when you stop pedaling. And speaking of safety, you may be wondering how the riser actually works, as in what is actually making it go up and down. And it actually uses this gigantic bolt or screw which actuates the movement versus a belt-driven system, which basically means there's pretty much no risk of this thing ever snapping or anything like that. And the riser also has an integrated steering mechanism which replicates some of the functionality that was found on the Sturzo. So the steering functionality works just like the Sturzo, where you can steer within compatible cycling training platforms like Zwift, which provides even more interactivity. And it uses an elastic system inside, which will automatically center your bar. So there's a little bit of resistance there, just like if you're riding a bike outside. Now there's a slight difference with the steering functionality versus the gradient simulation. So the steering functionality will connect to the app itself like Zwift, where the gradient simulation is going to be connecting to the trainer. So what's great about this is though you can use both of them if you'd like. You can use either one, or you don't have to use either one of them at all. Now, even if you don't use the steering aspect within the game, what I really liked about the Sturzo is that it took the edge off of riding inside, where it just provided a little bit of give to the handlebars. So it wasn't like I was riding in a static position the entire time. And I really like that about the riser as well. But there's even one more thing I want to toss in here. So along with the steering functionality, you'll also notice that there's a small amount of lateral movement in the fork support. Not a ton, but just a few millimeters that again just helps take the edge off. And if you're curious about stability, this thing is super solid. So I had no issues at all, like even on hard sprints. There's no wobbling going on. When you're standing up, it's super stable. And the auto centering of the steering keeps the handlebars in place quite well. So when we put all these things together, the gradient simulations, the steering functionality, as well as that subtle lateral movement, the riser isn't just a gradient simulator in my mind. It actually makes my indoor riding experience much more comfortable and enjoyable because I'm not stuck in a static position when I'm riding. It provides the stimulation of the gradient changes, the steering functionality if you want to use that, as well as the comfort that's provided by the steering, as well as that lateral movement. So for me, the riser is a really great all-in-one accessory to elevate the indoor cycling experience. So I left pricing to last because some of these figures will actually change over time. So right now, worldwide shipping costs are astronomical, which are definitely affecting a lot of different industries. So if you're in the EU, the riser will cost 799 euros. That figure shouldn't change, but for the rest of the world, they will likely change over time. So for the US, when the riser is available later this year, it's going to cost $10.99, which Elite knows it's kind of steep, but they kind of have their hands tied with that. For comparison, if this was shipping in March of 2020, when shipping costs were a lot less insane, it would probably be around the $850 range. So I just say stay tuned for pricing, as that will change over time. Anyhow, that's everything new with the Elite Rizer Gradient Simulator. And if you did find the information in this video useful, don't be shy about hitting that like button down below, and also subscribing to the channel for plenty more sports tech videos that are coming soon. In the meantime, happy riding, and we will see you in the next video.